Before we do, just for our members, just a moment of silence. We lost a couple of weeks ago, less than 2 weeks ago, Joe Lombardo, who was one of our World War II veterans. He actually was set to speak at our meeting, I don't know if it was the April meeting maybe, and then he ended up getting pneumonia, didn't feel good. He was all mad at the doctors because he felt good enough to come, but we just found out tonight that he passed away a couple of weeks ago. So if we all give a moment of silence for a minute for Joe. He's with his unit up in heaven now. We're very excited to have Al tonight. Actually, he was recommended by Greg. Is Greg here?
Yeah.
Oh, there he is. I'm sorry, I just talked to him. Greg was here and spoke of, I don't know, was it last year, Greg? Yeah. Last year. And he called and recommended Al Kischkum, who's from Wallingford. He's a World War II veteran, and he's going to be reviewing some of his morning reports as he remembers his first days in combat during World War II. He's going to relay some of his experience and memories at the battle in the Battle of the Bulge. Al went over to France as a platoon sergeant. On the first day they were shelled, his lieutenant was wounded and he took over to assist. 6 weeks or so after being in combat, he was called off the field when they gave him a discharge as an enlisted man and then swore him in as a battlefield commissioned lieutenant. The day after, Al was wounded in combat and carried off the field while heading towards what would become one of the biggest tank battles of the war. He was released back into service just in time for Patton's big push, and then was called December 20th into the Battle of the Bulge. So Al's going to talk about those experiences. Al was born and lived in Wallingford his whole life. He's soon to be the ripe old age of 97, like young age. And he still works as the assistant building, plumbing, and heating inspector for the town of Wallingford, now for 38 years. And I know we have some of his fellow colleagues that are here tonight, so we're happy to have you here as well. So we're happy to have you here for what we know will be an interesting presentation. Thank you, Al.
Thank you. All set to go? Well, veterans, family members, and friends, I hope that I don't disappoint you in any which way. I do want to say, whatever I say about my part in combat is not made up. Everything that I say actually happened. And as I go along, I'm going to start from the first time we landed on the beach and worked into the hedgerows and went on until we finished the war. All set? Here we go. All right. I was with the 4th Armored Division. That tells you that's tanks. But an armored division has battalions of infantry, which they call armored infantry, because the vehicles are a little heavier metal. So I don't want to take any credit away from the boys who hit the beach on D-Day. You've got to give them credit. Believe it. All right. We were being held, often wondered, what are they saving us for? Well, eventually they put us into the hedgerows, and everybody that was met on our way to the hedgerows were saying, I am the only one left. Don't go, you'll never live. And you began to wonder. But that was not the truth. Eventually, you got used to something like that. All right, so let's start off. We got in the hedgerows, relieved some infantry division probably, and we're told not to make yourself visible in any which way, especially during the daytime. Well, when morning came, everybody got up and thought that, hey, this isn't bad. Let me go walk over to here, or let me walk over to there. And the Germans let us do it. About 2 days after we hit the hedgerows, the Germans set a real heavy barrage. And believe it or not, out of 150 men from my company that were in the hedgerow, 75 were wounded or killed. B Company, which was another company, had the same amount. They had maybe about 10 men more killed or wounded. Now that's a pretty heavy round. I remember leaving my best buddy. I said, Freddie, I'm going to go and check on the rest of the men, see how they're doing. And on the way there, shells were dropping and people were falling, and I'm standing up saying, what are they saving me for? But later on in the day, Lieutenant Leahy, who was the platoon leader at that time, got hit by shrapnel after dark, and he found out later it was from our own artillery. They thought that where we were filling in was taken over by the Germans, but it wasn't. A day or two after being in the hedgerows, a plane, a raid of planes, 300 planes came over from German positions to our front. Then I knew what we were up to. As soon as the planes got through, they said, everybody off, you are no longer part of the First Army, you are part of the Third Army. And guess who was leading the Third Army? General Beck, you are right. All right, so once we got settled off the field and loaded up, we were told to head for certain spots and hold those warriors on the other side so that they couldn't cause any trouble. And I was heading somewhere. I rode all night with my men, just going, and I was within a couple of 100 yards of the town that I was given to take, and the German column was coming towards me. Well, what do? Do I start a fight? Well, I wasn't in the mood. So I picked up the telephone and radioed back to who was ever in my rear saying, here comes a German column. Do what you gotta do. I'm going into town. And as I got into town, there was another column just coming through the alleyway. And my machine gunner opened up fire to make sure that they stopped. A Frenchman ran over to the German leader and gave him a few wallops and came running back. As he came back, he dropped down dead. Now, I do not know whether it was the excitement that he had a heart attack or whether my machine gunner actually killed him. Well, this went on, and finally we had to cross the Moselle River. And it ends up funny. Why we had to cross it, I have no idea. We waded across the river up to here, and then came back. Just before nightfall, they said, we're going to go across again, but we're going to have engineers bring boats. One of the new lieutenants just came into the outfit and said, I found a place we could wade across. Yes, up to here for him was up to here for me. Well, we got there, and the Germans opened up with their machine gun. And we didn't do any firing. We walked, went up to within a certain distance of the woods that they were in, and we made a left turn, and the German was out there yelling and calling for his buddies. Hey, machine gun, so-and-so, so-and-so. Well, whatever happened, I was left behind with a new recruit. And he kept saying to me all night, Sergeant, let's get out of here. All the rest of them is gone. I said, see the difference between you and a man who's had a little experience? They're next to you. You don't even know they're there. How are the Germans going to know you're there? Well, about 3:30 in the morning, just as daybreak, a man came running up looking for us. I and my helper there were the only two dopes laying there waiting for something to happen. And we had to cross the river again. And one thing would lead to another, and we would have to cross another river. I don't know what. Somebody likes to cross rivers. And naturally, every time we crossed the river, somebody got killed of our men, because the Germans were zeroed in. So let's get on with the story. So then September 13th, we were standing up on a hill, and off in the distance, you could see the German tanks. And down below us, almost behind the cliff, were some German infantrymen. We called for artillery to knock those artillery infantrymen out. And after a few seconds, a shell came in and landed about 20 feet from us. It didn't explode. We hurried up to call back to artillery and said, that round was short. He said, we didn't fire a round yet. It was the German tanks off in the distance. That's how close they came to killing 3 of them. Well, that night, a runner came up and he said, they want to see you down, the company commander wants to see you. And I said, oh, I went to London to take some extra infantry tactics. And I said, there's a report of 200 Germans in the town next to me, or next to us. I said, I know what they want. They think I'm going to go in there because I had a little extra training and clean that town up. But that wasn't the case. They told us to raise my right hand, and they discharged me. And I said, well, what's all this all about? And they said, now keep your right hand up and repeat what we were repeating. And they swore me in as a lieutenant, which was what you call a battlefield commission. When they asked me if I would accept it, I said no. Who wants to be a second? And then I thought it over before he ran away. I said, come back here. I said, if I should get killed, at least my folks back home will say he did his best. and that's why I accept. All right? Okay, so let's see how far we got now. Oh, okay. The next morning, we would sleep out into the muddy hole that we dug and stuff. And we get up in the morning, and we had dry food that we could heat up on a little gas burner. And the little gas burner that I had wasn't working right, and I couldn't heat the water to make my soluble coffee. To this day, I will not drink cold coffee. I figure that it's a bad omen for me. So, a day or two after being in the field hospital, the general's car with the stars covered drove up and were looking for me. And I said, well, what are you looking for? They said, well, we discharged you, and you have not technically signed papers that you would still be in office. Oh, I said, oh, good. But I accepted whatever they were, and they brought me back to division headquarters. Get this, division headquarters was 80 miles away from any combat. Okay? Now you gotta listen to what's coming. They asked me all the so-called clerks, company clerks, and battalion clerks was there. They did all the paperwork. They asked me if I would come into their room and have a little social gathering. Well, I never touched liquor in my life, but just to be on the friendly side, I'd had a drink. And I'm standing on one leg like this. And one of the men come up to me, drunker than the heck, and he says, "Who do you guys think you are kidding? You come over here and say people are shooting at you back there." He says, well, who you think you're kidding? Well, what do? Hit him? I can't hit him. I just became an officer and a gentleman. All right? So, somebody came to my defense and says, well, look, he's got a bullet wound through him. Well, what do you think? So I said, well, fellas, I think I better go. So I went back to my room. The next morning, he did come to me and apologize. Okay, you got that story. So the following morning, I went up to where all the desks were, and the company clerks were. He said, so-and-so was wounded yesterday. I'll have to make a report on it. And that went by. The next morning, he came in front of me and he slammed a piece of paper down and said, damn it, why can't they get killed right off the bat instead of getting wounded and then dying and making all that work for me? How do you think I felt? All right? So, then they passed a regulation. Visiting officers from the field couldn't eat anything until everybody who lived, so to speak, there had their meal. I said that the company commander came the following day, my ex-company commander. I said, take me out of here before I kill someone. Okay, well that was just in time for me. It was already getting to be November. And General Patton was getting ready for the biggest push of the war. He was going to start everybody off in our division, and that was the 9th of November, and we were supposed to capture Saarbrücken for November 11th, his birthday. Well, it was raining for a week and stuff. Our tanks got back down, and we took one sweet heck of a beating. All right. So, General Patton didn't make his thing to Saarbrücken in time. But we did go and take town. First of all, before I get too far in this, crossing the river again, a different river, going into Germany, a couple of shells hit behind me. And my buddy and I ran to two fellas who were laying in the mud, and he said, they're dead. Well, I don't know, maybe 15 years later at a reunion, one of those dead were at the table. I said, what are you doing here? How'd you get here? And he said, well, he was only knocked out. The other fellow was dead from the explosion. But anyway, as we were taking these little towns, I heard over my beeper, or little radio that we used to have, a Polish voice say, here they come from our right front, let them have it. The German army was made up of all Europeans. And they either fight or get killed, I guess. And one shell hit behind me, quite a way. And pain, I heard something hit me in the leg. And I got a little piece of shrapnel. That's another wound. That's twice already, all right? But after a couple of days, General Patton wanted our general to take the whole division off the field, and he was going to replace it with another division. But General Patton knew something that we didn't know. And within a day or two, the news came that the Germans were up in the near Bastogne, and they had the airborne surrounded. Could we get there within a couple of days? Patton says, I'll be there in 24 hours. We got in that vehicle of ours and headed 100 miles, 150 miles. And the closer we got to Bastogne, or where we were headed, the colder it got. Well, when we finally got there, it was daybreak. And I was asked, or more or less told, go to the top of the hill and see if there are any Germans on your way up. Well, I'm no joke. The Germans were on that side. I walked all the way up to the top of the hill on this side. And if they could find me, all well and good. But nothing happened. All right? So we got orders. We're going to move. Got to move forward. And somebody said to me, by that time I was lieutenant, The password and countersign are dynamite and explosives. Okay? And there were bridges there that weren't blown yet, and rivers to be crossed. 40 years later, at a reunion, the man who was almost head of battalion headquarters asked me, "What did you want with dynamite and explosives?" That's what we used to practice. We would get 20, 30 men in a circle and say something and see how it ended up at the end. And there we go. All right? But in this book, if anybody wants to look, there's a picture of a dead American over the side, just across the river. And a town of Warnock on that same side, on this side of the road here. And I'm the only one awake, I think, because I am the only one who saw it happen, and nobody ever mentioned it. A tank in Warnock came out of the streets and headed towards us and stopped and observed who was out there. Then turned around and went back in. Then a couple of MPs with 2 German prisoners riding on the Jeep, so to speak, because we didn't call them Jeeps. In the Armored Division, a Jeep was a Peep. Okay? And when they came to that dead American, one German pointed and said something in German and laughed. The MP took his pistol, put it to the German's head, and now there were 2 dead people. Okay? All right. So, eventually, we got going. We're going to ride in the vehicles up the hill. I was in A company. B company was going on foot to take Warnock. And I went around the rear because there was too much German machine gun fire going on. And I said to the fella, if you run into any fighting, come back and tell me. Don't get involved. He didn't come back. There were a lot more fighting or fire going on. And I sent a friend of mine from Plymouth, Connecticut, wherever that is here. And I said, Rap, do the same. And the snow in that area was a foot deep, and the pine trees were so thick you couldn't see from here to there. And he came running back out of breath. I said, Rap, what's the matter? He says, well, I thought I heard something. He had a squad of men, and they were backtracking around the fir tree, and they bumped into something, and they turned around, and it was a German doing the same thing. So the German took off, and we took off. That's all well and good. So by that time, it was the 21st of December. Every day, every night, I was on some kind of a patrol. I was on a patrol Christmas Eve. The Germans had built a roadblock, and I walked up to the roadblock, and when I left it, the Germans would walk up to it. I don't know what they were doing, but there was a full moon out. What a beautiful night to go on patrol. Nobody could see you. All right? It's just like somebody turned a light on. I said to the men, stay here near this haystack. I got to go and do what I was told to do. I said, if I don't come back, don't bother coming after me, because it'll be too late. But I came back with no problem. And Christmas Day, the day after Christmas, one of our tanks decided that we're going to break through. And they did, and that's the end of the Battle of the Bulge. Okay. So, by that time, we were going into Germany, the Ardennes forest. The Battle of the Bulge was considered the Battle of the Ardennes. But the big thing was Bastogne. Well, running around Germany, shooting up the German army and more or less people and animals. It was no fun, but it had to be done. Finally, it was already March. And the Germans were up on a hill, and we went into the woods, and I told the tanker, here comes 3 German tanks. Be ready for them. He said, oh no, they're our tanks. They went back for repairs, but they weren't. In the morning, they let us have it. I was laying under a tank when a German round hit the tank. I said, this son of a gun is shooting at me. So I said, let me get out of here. And I ran from here probably to that camera and went into a little slit trench about that deep. I laid down there, and a round came just above me, my head, and cut a tree that big right off its roots. And I got splattered with, it wasn't, it was only an armor piercing. But I got splattered with all the roof ships that went and shipped me into my face and stuff. That's 3 times wounded already. So, as war went on, you could tell people were getting tired of it. The Germans were surrendering. I met the Russian army way in Czechoslovakia. I wasn't supposed to be there. And the German people thought that there was going to be a fight between the Russians and the Americans. But the Russian officer in charge, I don't know what he was thinking, but I know what I was thinking, is turn around and run. The Russian army had the men with their wives and their children, and that's how they fought the war. But anyway, there was one thing that I always said to myself, what are they saying? What kind of a horrible death are they saving me for? I've been next to a guy who got shot with his head knocked off and this and that, but I saw what I never want to happen to me. We took this little town, and just before we got into the building part, near a garage, a German soldier was out in the road, stretched out on his stomach, and he was burned. All right? I don't know if you want to hear this. The German soldier was out there with chickens pecking the food off his back. that was the horrible death that I never wanted. Okay? So, with that, I hope the time is up. And it's been a pleasure. I wish I had more time. I have pictures in the book here if anybody wants to look at them. But make sure that I end up with them again. All right?
Mind if we take some questions?
Go ahead. Yes.
When Patton said he will get you guys to this 100 miles away in 24 hours,
Yeah.
and you did just that.
Right.
Did everybody ride in trucks?
Well, some of us rode on the top of tanks.
Okay, but none of you were actually marching by foot.
No, we would have never made it.
That would have been the world record for a marathon.
Right. One of the warrant officers in the battalion kept a record of his vehicle. His vehicle traveled 1,700 miles. He went from one end of Europe to the other. 1,700 miles of fighting. I put in 1,700 miles of fighting. Yes?
I don't mean to hog the floor, but one of our now deceased members was in the Battle of the Bulge also, and he said that the Germans were firing air bursts 40 to 50 feet
Yeah.
above ground in order to get the shrapnel
Right.
down to the ground, because at first our guys were able to hide behind the trunks of a tree.
Right,
With
right.
the shells just coming in.
Or get down in a hole.
Yes.
Right, yes. The
Can't hide
worst,
from an air
one of the worst things to do is to be in a wooded area with artillery coming in at you. You're right. Yeah.
In honor of Uncle Chubby, could you tell the story about you and Uncle Chubby?
Which story?
Well, the one about the house with the Germans on the other side of it.
Oh, yeah, well, that was, evidently, we were going, we were heading towards Paris, I guess, because we were heading towards a town, I forget the name of it, which was a 2-hour ride from Paris, but we never got there. The little town before it, the Germans must have gotten strafed because there was two officers sitting in their vehicle alongside a church, completely burned, sitting there with their helmets on and nothing else but bones. And I got the credit for being that killer. It wasn't. It was a strafe. And what my son was talking about was, as we walked up to this cemetery next to the church, there was a big brick wall, and there was Germans on the other side of the church. And my friend Paul from Massachusetts was lobbing hand grenades over the roof at the Germans. But some of them were coming back. That's what my son is talking about. All right?
When did you finally get to come home? Was it in March or after the war was over?
Well, the war was over, yes. But I got home and I got home quick because we got points. So many points for longevity, so many points for, well, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, I got home in November. We got on a big ship in the Mediterranean and got to that thing that the English control or whoever was it, and the propeller broke and we had to go back and we lost 10 days. I still got home in November. All right? I got home probably in October, but I didn't get discharged for a whole month later. During those later years, they were sending people home, people with the most points, who were with the outfit the longest. So they were sending them home for 3 months vacation, and it got to the point where officers who never saw any combat, they were just rear echelon, were being sent home. And finally, my new company commander asked somebody, how come Al doesn't get to go home? He says, oh, he signed a paper saying that he would stay in a combat zone at least a year after the war was on. So I figured when the war was over, everybody would go home, which it was. If I stayed in any longer, I would have ended up who knows where. But I was happy getting home early.
After the war, did you see any concentration camps?
Not after the war. Our division and battalion had captured, so to speak, concentration and gas things. I think there's a picture in here, Eisenhower with a few of our generals bringing there to see it and saying that he always thought that 50 years from that day, people wouldn't believe what they see. And that's what's happening.
But you have stories that Patton witnessed that he went behind the shed and heaved up, was so disgusted what he saw. And there's a man that saw war
Right.
every case.
I didn't hear that story, but it's possible, right.
Al, were you offered to keep your commission after or before being discharged and remain?
Oh yes, I got discharged as an officer, and if I wanted to go somewhere, I didn't have to get discharged. Definitely not.
You
But
just chose to come home.
But I had enough of what I saw, like I tell you, about people way behind the lines telling me, quit telling lies. I didn't want any more of that. That's why I say, I was going to approach you people and say, all of these things that I'm saying are true. Don't question me, because they're the truth. If you want to discuss them and say, how come you did this instead of that, that's something. But it's done and over with. And when it happened, it was the thing that I did, right or wrong. Okay? So a lot of you might have questions about why didn't you do this or why didn't you do that?
Anybody else like to ask any questions? If not, how about I give it a nice big hand for